I mean, that's going to be a big one, guys. Listen up, watch. We're on Facebook Live. We're on the Breeze 93.9. We're also in the Zoom. And Zooming with us this morning, the director of Rev Tax, Dafne Shimizu. Good morning, Daph.
Half a day, Chris. Half a day, Jason. And half a day, Guam.
Thank you for joining us in this, what would be your first interview since the governor's executive order came out. We're doing the All Rise now. Daph, I guess just in a nutshell, what can you tell us? I know that she had said that she wanted applications accepted by September 1st. Other than that, if you could just run through the whole thing, because I don't know what rules and regs we're using. Is it Rise, All Rise, or whatever? Just so from point zero, go ahead.
Okay, so you know what? As you know, back in May, the Executive Order 2021-11 was issued, and that was to expand the eligibility for the RISE Act. And so, of course, after kind of going through the last few months, there have been a lot of issues with regards to, of course, the document requirements and, other things relating to trying to implement the RISE Act itself. And so last Friday, Governor Leon Guerrero did sign another executive order, which is Executive Order 2021-18. And basically what 2021-18 does is it rescinds 2021-11. So 2021-11, which is the expansion of the eligibility for the RISE Act itself, that is not in place anymore. So what does this mean, right? Of course, because we saw 2021-11 and now we see 2021-18. 2021-18 is actually the creation of an actual separate program called All Rise. And so this is not like what we saw back in May or with the 2021-11. This is an actual separate program from the law and from the law itself. And so, of course, it's very similar to what we saw with All Rise or the prior executive order, but the legal structure is a little bit different. And so this now changes our ability to be able to adjust the requirements or what's required. I know a lot of the challenges that we were facing were, of course, the issue of requirement of documents, like, for example, a mayor's verification, and then, of course, contemplation of certification of employment that's going to be required and what's involved. And so with regards to now what exists is, again, it's a separate program. It's called the All Rise. And the requirements are now just submission of an application and then certification of certain information, with regards to eligibility. So, we will not be requiring a mayor's verification. We will not be requiring certification of employment. So those documents will no longer be required. Again, what will be required is simply going to be the application form itself. And then, of course, certification of certain information. And so in that information, in terms of eligibility, it's, really spelled out in 2021-18, which is you have to have filed a 2020 tax return. You have to, of course, meet the income thresholds, which, are the same, 40,000 for a single filer, 80,000 or less for joint filers. And you'll have to, of course, have experienced and certify that your household has experienced negative impact from COVID-19. You're going to have to also submit either an 8821, which is an IRS form, which would appoint Rev Tax to be able to access your tax information, or the equivalent of the 8821, which, again, we're trying to make the process as simple as possible. And then, of course, you're going to elect to receive payments under this program in lieu of any other, payments that may have been available under the other programs. So those are the differences. And again, of course, it's been very important that we address the issue of the documents because it's been such a huge issue in terms of trying to obtain the documents. We saw, over the last several months, of course, a huge demand for mayor's verification, and our mayors, of course, running into some challenges with trying to meet that demand. And, of course, that was a big issue, and Governor Leon Guerrero wanted to make sure that we address that. So those are the main changes. And again, as you mentioned earlier, we have no later, we must move forward and open up the application no later than September 1. Over the weekend, I was communicating with our IT vendor on just kind of the final changes that need to be made so that way we can update the programming and get this going as soon as possible. And this next week, of course, I've already met with our deputy director, and we're going to be having internal meetings so that we can, again, it has to be a really concerted, organized effort. And we're going to be hopefully working in conjunction with, some of our other agency partners. And that's what we're going to be working on this week, is just making sure that we're as prepared as possible for the launch of the application and for the implementation of the program.
I had a call while you were talking from a non-filer. He said to ask Daphne, what about the non-filers?
So with regards to non-filers, the non-filer form actually is a form that was the equivalent of a 2019 or 2018 return. And so if you were a non-filer, that non-filer form does not equate to a 2020 tax return. And so a 2020 tax return must be filed. And, just to share with you though, Chris, there is the ability for people to file a 2020 return online. And so you can go to myguamtax.com and you can actually file a return online. And so for those individuals who filed a non-filer form, that non-filer form is not considered the equivalent of a 2020 return.
Wait, so you're saying that non-filers aren't going to be eligible for the All Rise?
No, that's not the case. Non-filers, if you were a non-filer, meaning that, of course, a non-filer was an individual who was not required to file a return because perhaps they fell below the income threshold. And so they filed a non-filer form in 2020. And that non-filer form was the equivalent of a 2019 or 2018 return. And we're still, of course, discussing, but you must have filed a 2020 tax return. And, again, there is a mechanism for filing, right? That mechanism for filing and having a validly filed and processed return is getting on to myguamtax.com and filing it. And again, we're still kind of working out the details of it. I know there's a lot of concern about especially the non-filers, because of the fact that they don't normally file a return. I believe as of end of July, we probably had between 50 to 60,000 returns already filed. And so that's actually quite high in terms of number of returns filed when we compare to prior years. So, we're hopeful that the majority of people have filed their 2020 returns. And then, of course, we've been doing our best to process those.
So, Daph, if you were a non-filer who did not file in 2020, because that's what's required to be eligible for the All Rise, what do you suggest those individuals do to guarantee that they'll get this first come, first serve All Rise payment?
Well, one of the questions that's going to be asked on the form, the application form, is going to be, did you file a 2020 return? And if you have not filed it, of course, again, for those individuals who have simple returns and are able to file online, we highly suggest and recommend that you get onto myguamtax.com and you go ahead and file your return. And, again, the majority of those individuals who file non-filer forms will likely also qualify to file that 2020 Form 1040. And so again, if you get onto myguamtax.com, I've actually had people tell me, of course, it's been a while because, people have been filing their filing their 2020 returns for a bit now, but I've had people tell me that, it takes less than 10 minutes to file. And so, again, if you hadn't filed a return because you were a non-filer, we just highly recommend that you go ahead and file that so that we can have that on file, because that is one of the questions that's going to be asked on the application form.
Does it matter if you filed for an extension?
Hi, Bree.
Hi,
with regards to the filing of return, you actually must have filed an actual return. So the extension itself is not the equivalent of the return. So you would actually have to have, and the language in the executive order states validly filed and processed return. Similar to what we saw with, the EIPs, where not only must it have been filed, but it has to be validly filed and processed. And of course, our team is working to make sure that we process as many of the returns as possible. Right now, what's happening is we are seeing a lot of amended returns because of if you recall, the unemployment compensation, that particular, the exclusion of $10,200 from unemployment, which came out after people started filing returns already this year. And so we are seeing now a lot of amended returns, but you must have a validly filed and processed return. And our team, again, in the administering and implementation of this program, we know it's very important because first in, first out. So we're doing our best. And our team, actually, even through the weekend, I've been talking with some of our team members. Again, want to make sure that the way we implement is as fair as possible, that we, of course, consider, all the information that we have on file. But an extension is not considered a return.
I'm sorry, I had just one more. So we just got off the phone with a guy who's a non-filer, and he said that they don't have a computer, and he went in and tried to file 2020, and it wasn't accepted. So how do they? Is it only 2020 online filing that's being accepted for this stuff?
No, it's not 2020 online filing, it's 2020 filing, but it has to be a validly filed and processed return. And what that means, and of course we ran into this issue even when we were doing EIP, I think in particular when we were doing EIP 1, because the question of a file, what is validly filed and processed? And of course, in the ideal world where we are able to have a filed return processed immediately, right? That validly filed and processed language, wouldn't be as significant. But because there is a gap between the time that we receive a return when it's considered filed and the time it's actually processed, and of course, there are other things that have to be considered as well. For example, we run into issues where people file a return and perhaps there's an error, right? So there are reasons why a filed return may not be considered validly filed and processed at the point of it being submitted or filed. Another issue, and this is something again which we ran into with EIP 1 or 2, is of course, to be considered validly filed and processed, it should be a clean return. If you have an error on your return, sometimes we run into errors, for example, maybe where one of the more common ones is duplicate dependents. So for example, where more than one taxpayer claims a dependent, that causes a tax return to error out. And those types of returns where there is an error that is not cleared up, that's not considered validly filed and processed.
So I'm sorry, just to clarify, unemployed people who don't file taxes aren't eligible unless they get a validly processed 2020, which means you guys have to stamp it, or they file online.
Right, but I do highly recommend, and so even with regards to the application itself, as much as possible, especially because there are not those requirements for the submission of supporting documents, that as much as possible, we're recommending that people file as many things online as possible. When you file a return online, again, as long as all your basic information, social security number, and other information is not, it doesn't cause the system to error out, and we're able to verify what is filed in the system, then it's considered validly filed and processed. And so, again, we highly recommend that people file online if possible, that if you qualify, and that will result in probably the most quick way to get a validly filed and processed return. The other thing is, of course, with regards to the application process itself. And so Bree, of course, we had to make some changes to the application because of the new executive order. And so over the weekend, we were kind of looking at some of the changes that are going to be made to the application. But, number one is that there isn't going to be the requirement for, the mayor's verification and those other submission of those supporting documents. So for those individuals, again, who are able to file online, we highly recommend that you do. And, one thing that has been offered to us, and of course, we're going to be meeting with the Guam Public Library team, is that, of course, at our Guam Public Libraries, people are able to access computers there, not only for the purpose of filing, but also for the purpose of printing if there is a need to print documents. And so one thing that, of course, I've discussed with Melvin Wampat Borja is the possibility of our team, of course, having meeting with the library team so that way we can, provide more information and to the library team as people work to get their applications in. But we highly recommend, as much as possible, you do things online. And the reason is that it makes the process go a lot more quickly for the individual and for us as we work to process. But similar to, of course, what we've been saying, even when Executive Order 2021-11 was in place, it is first in, first out in terms of application. So, for those individuals, again, who submit an application form, we're going to look at all eligibility requirements, including the filing of a return, including the certification that's required for example, for residency, for the issue of certifying that you had actually undergone or your household did undergo or experience a negative economic impact. all of those are going to be on the application form itself.
Another question here. If an individual owes GovGuam, will the RISE payment be garnished?
So, I believe that the original All Rise language the original RISE Act actually did have language regarding no garnishments. Of course, although that was not indicated in the executive order, I don't have an answer for you, but I believe that it's not indicated here. But I believe that, again, this kind of mirrors the RISE Act itself. That's something that I'll have to get back to you on to confirm. But, again, this is very similar to what we saw with the All Rise. Likely a lot of the requirements and the way that we're implementing is going to be very similar itself, but the legal structure of this particular program is different because this isn't just an expansion of eligibility now. This is actually the creation of a whole separate kind of program, which is what, again, allows for us to be able to adjust the requirements.
Right, okay. We have another question here. How about Social Security retirees who are non-filers? Did you ask that?
Right, and so I know, again, that's another big issue. So with regards to Social Security retirees, people who, and this kind of goes back to those individuals who, similar to the non-filers, again, we're going to be looking for a 2020 return grade. That's kind of what is indicated. But, of course, we're still, because this was just issued Friday, our team still has to meet today, and we're going to be kind of going through this. The difficulty that we run into, of course, with regards to Social Security recipients who may not be filers is, having their information available, right? Because that is something that we won't be able to decipher unless they have, again, some type of information in our system. So, that's, again, something that we're going to have to look at. But again, if you look at the eligibility that's spelled out is that you must have a 2020 return that's validly filed and processed, that you must, again, meet the income thresholds, meaning you don't exceed the 40,000 if you're a single filer, you don't exceed the 80,000 if you're joint filers. You must have actually, your household must have actually experienced negative economic impact from the COVID-19 pandemic, and you must certify that. You also must file with us some information with regards to appointing Rev Tax via either an 8821 or an equivalent, and again, certify that you are receiving these payments in lieu of any other payments for other programs.
So are we looking at another executive order coming out, amending the last week's executive order to kind of address some of the questions and additional confusion?
At this point, I don't contemplate that there's going to be another executive order that's going to be issued, and perhaps it may not even be necessary. Again, last week before the executive order was issued, I know the Governor's Office Legal Counsel had been working on this very carefully, and we had been in communication with them. A lot of the questions I think that people have will hopefully be able to address very, very soon. I know that there's a lot of things happening today. There's budget discussions that are happening. And so I know, if you remember last Friday, the legislature was in committee of the whole because, of course, there was discussion about the budget and the revenue projections for FY 2022. So that was where I spent the majority of my afternoon. And that's where we're going to be headed this morning. But I have been in communication with my team so that we can make sure we address these issues. And again, I don't contemplate that there's going to be another executive order, or even perhaps, and I would have to check with legal with regards to what is required in terms of laying out or spelling out what is going to be the final eligibility. But again, the way that it's laid out is you must have a 2020 return. And so for now, at least that's what we really believe that we're going to have to follow exactly what's laid out here. Yeah. But as I mentioned, with regards to, again, those individuals who are not required to file a return, there is still the ability to file online. And that's, again, something that we highly recommend. And I believe that the majority of people we've seen a huge number of people file their returns already. We've seen that, I believe as of the July report that we had done, the refund liability report, which we will be submitting to the legislature today, that we really just have, I think, about of the returns that we have that were filed with us, the number of unprocessed returns is not significantly high, at least in comparison to other the other periods. So we're confident we're going to be able to get people's applications reviewed, and again, for those individuals who have not filed a return, because maybe they are not qualified, there is a mechanism for doing so, and that mechanism is very, very simple. And so again, we're trying not to make this too complicated, but at the same time, make sure that we follow the eligibility.
Yeah.
And I can see.
Yeah. Oh, you got jokes, huh? It's not too complicated.
Where are you guys in processing tax returns? Because we have somebody here. You guys are only up to April 25th. Ending file date ended on May 15th.
So we did process refunds last week. I know we didn't process refunds in the prior week. I think that when I asked our supervisor where we were, I think we're very close to being in the beginning of May. But Bree, of course, what we're seeing now, and part of the slowdown is because now we're seeing amended returns. So, where probably before we didn't see as many amended returns because of the fact that we did have a lot of a lot of people who filed early that had received unemployment compensation, and then they had filed their tax returns, and then later, of course, as a result of the exclusion of the 10,200 came back and are amending returns. Now we're seeing a lot of the amended returns. So we're trying to get through these as quickly as we can. Our team is actually is actually working 6 days a week and has been for a bit so that we can get these out. And again, as we work to implement, we're trying to be as thoughtful as possible of the process. And again, making sure that we try to make it as simple as possible for our people.
So on September 1, is it just going to go online and people can apply at that time, or just that the application is going to be made available?
No, so our target is to launch the form or launch the application no later than September 1. And right now we're, again, just kind of going back and forth, finalizing some of the programming with our IT team. And so once we do launch, Bree, once we launch, it'll be ready and available to be, done online, or for people to come in and file it here at the department. And, once we launch, it's going to have to be ready. We're going to make sure that it's ready, and that you could do it. And usually how our vendor or how our IT programming has worked is when it's available like midnight. So we make sure that we, try to open it up and that it's available. But again, no later than September 1, and our team is working towards that now.
So you're thinking maybe at midnight, September 1? Because then what about the people that, that it originally was intended for, that might not have, computers or can't go online, and so they're not going to be first in. They're going to be like left out.
Right. And again, we're trying to be as thoughtful as possible. And that's a great point with regards to the opening of the application form. Perhaps it becomes opening all at the same time, maybe at 8 in the morning. Our team, though, is again working on, now that we have this adjusted, this new executive order that addresses the issue of the requirements of the forms, or the supporting documents and what's required. I think that we're in a better position now to finalize our actual implementation plan so we can move forward. And so a lot of our discussion today and probably through the next couple of days is going to be on that implementation. And to your point, actually, that's a great point, because, again, usually what we do is we open up a form at midnight, but, again, that's a great point that you bring up. And, it's something we'll take into consideration as we work again, because absolutely, we want to make sure that implementation is done as fairly as possible and that we give everybody the opportunity at the same time to file.
Daph, we did have a question here in the comments relative to what is the certification requirement for suffering? Is it a yes or no checkbox, or actual documents needed?
There is going to be no documents that's going to be required to be submitted. And so it's going to be a certification that your family or that your household did experience negative economic impact. And it's going to be, again, the way that we contemplate it is that you're going to have to check a box yes or check a box no. And of course, you're certifying under penalties of perjury, right? Any of the information that is on the form. And so It's very important that all the questions are answered correctly and accurately. But no submission of documents will be required.
Okay. You good? Anything else?
Yeah. I don't think so.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
Yeah, we're going to unpack that, Daph, and then maybe circle back.
Well, I think it's still a little early on. Again, we worked through the weekend to just try to adjust the form, make sure that it's ready, make sure that that it ties with the executive order. Now we're going back and forth with our IT vendor. We're hopeful that we're going to be able to launch soon. As Bree mentioned, we have until September 1st to open up and to launch the form. Our team is working on preparing for that. Again, also, as we discussed earlier, we're making sure that, again, we are very thoughtful about how we process, about how we implement, that it's as fair as possible because it is based on first in, first out. And we're going to be working to provide as much information as we can to the community so that we reduce the amount of confusion and that people are very aware of what is required for the program. And again, thank you for getting me on this morning.
Yeah.
And we actually are starting some of our training for the launch of our driver's license system. So I'm going to head into that in a little bit.
I know. I just wanted to go back to the RISE, the original RISE Act. Did you guys help draft that with Senator Regine Bisco-Lee?
On the original RISE Act, if you recall, and we did submit some recommendations back in December 11. The RISE bill came out in March 2020, I believe, or April 2020, around the same time that I guess the CARES Act was kind of discussion was happening. So it was very, very early on in COVID. And then it went through it kind of evolved through the year. Of course, I think as some of the federal aid was paid out for EIP1, and then of course we had EIP2, then a lot of the discussion with regards to the RISE, again, there wasn't a lot of discussion because there was a lot of the federal funding that was already going out. And so it wasn't until probably around November, I believe, when we started, I guess there was additional discussion about the RISE Act and kind of reviving the RISE bill. And so there was, I believe, the public hearing on the RISE Act or the RISE bill was in early December, like December 7, something like that. Rev Tax did provide comments to Senator Lee's office with regards to some of the concerns with regards to the language. And, I think that some of the challenges that we ran into is because, I really believe that because it was some of the language that existed prior to, if it had gone in or become law probably earlier in the year, then we may not have run into some of the issues with some of the language at the end of the year. And I don't know if you can kind of, because it was contemplated to be issued in 2020 early. And so when I think that when we got to the end of the year, again, there were certain things which we did, I believe, in our comments, try to point out, but again, that was back in December 11, 2020, when we did provide some comment.
Last one, Daph. I don't know if the child tax credit, because we've also got Dr. Ho on.
Oh, well,
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Child tax credit status?
So on the child tax credit, as you know, the IRS has started to roll out the advanced child tax credit since July 15. We are now, right now, we've been in the final kind of phases of our discussion on our implementation plan, and in fact need to follow up again with regards to the Treasury and the IRS with regards to the plan. We're just kind of waiting. We had been in discussion since, of course, we communicated with them since EIP 3 discussions were done. We began to discuss the advanced child tax credit, and so now I know we're coming into the mid part of August, and the IRS in the continental United States, what we're seeing is the IRS is on their second month of a rollout for the monthly payments, but we are not able to implement until we get the implementation plan finalized and approved. And that's something, again, of course, we've been in communication with our counterparts at the IRS with regards to this. And now we're just kind of waiting for the final approval for it. And it's something that we're going to have to follow up on to find out where things are.
All right. Thanks, Daphne.
Thank you so much. Okay, and we'll provide more information as we have it. Thanks again, Bree. Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Have a great day. Stay
You
safe
too.
and
All
stay
right.
safe, Guam.
Okay. There you go. Dafne Shimizu, Rev Tax Director.
Yeah.
Yeah. All rise. Well, I guess my advice to you guys, if you're a non-filer and you haven't filed in 2020, you need to go file, whether it's online or in person. You need to get your filing stamped so it can be considered validly processed as a filing. Okay, so you can get the all rise. You guys better go do that, because that's the first eligibility. Okay, and I know you guys out there are hurting. If you're a non-filer, you're hurting, and the original Rise Act was, I think, designed to help you.
It was